Cole Kelly. I represent District 12, which covers part of Utah County, also Wasatch County, Duchesne County, Uinta County, and Daggett County. So,
Thank you. Chair Hymas?
Yeah, thank you. Matt Hymas, I cover District 10. I am going to be walking and driving for a second, but hopefully I don't cut out. Happy to be here. I will get to my computer as soon as I can.
Thank you. Member Booth?
I'm Randy Booth, and I represent District 13, Nebo School District, and Provo City School District. Grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just call as the pictures pop up on my screen. So I'm so glad.
Randy, that shirt is awesome. Sharp.
Thanks to my wife.
You're correct. Usually the case. For me too.
I need one of those. Can she do my shopping for me? Because that would be helpful. I am aesthetically challenged.
I'll get her right on it.
Yeah, she's great. All right, we're going to go right into our agenda since we are having only 2 hours today, and we do not have any requests for public comment today. So let's move right into 1.2, which is our statewide online education program amendment. And it looks like we have both Ben Rasmussen and Tammy Gear here. Do one of you want to lead out?
I'll be happy to lead off, Chair.
Okay.
Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. So this is a case where staff is recommending a substantial rewrite of this rule. It's one of the longer rules that the board has adopted, and staff has reviewed this and amended it so to take out a lot of information that is already in statutes and kind of condense it and make it more succinct, hopefully. There's a lot in here, so we're happy to answer any questions that you have and go from there.
Okay. Members, do you have any questions on these?
What are some of the major changes that we should be aware of here? Help us to see what's being changed here.
Would you like me to take that, Chair Davis?
Sure.
So most of this is just we have taken out, if it's already in statute and we felt like it didn't need to be redefined, we've taken that out. We've just tightened up a lot of the wording. There's not a lot of substantial changes. It just kind of clarifies things that were in the statute and takes out a lot of stuff that was already covered. So there's not a ton of just substantial changes. We did have some questions from some BAs, and we looked at those, and the things that they were concerned about are things that we can't change because they were in statute.
Okay. Thank you. And I think, Ben, did you talk to Mr. Van Tassel, who had given some input on this rule? And were you able to make those changes? Were those technical or substantive?
It's been a while since I've talked to Mr. Van Tassel. I do believe that I addressed them, but it's been a while. So I'll have to take a look at my emails on that one, but I think they've been addressed.
Okay. And similarly, Director Gear, and you and I talked about this, so you reviewed the sheet that the business administrator from South Summit sent in, and all of the things that he was requesting, those are all in code.
Correct.
So we did not have any flexibility in the rule based on what that input was. Is that what your understanding is?
That is correct.
Okay. And then I had reached out to the bill sponsor to get the intent of the one word that you and I discussed, the relevant word in code, and I have not heard back from him. So I don't know if we should move forward with that one or just move forward without that and see when he responds if we make that amendment in full board.
Can I
Go ahead.
respond? Yeah, so I would ask that we go ahead and move this forward. If you hear from him before it goes before full board, we can change that little bit then. The rest of it is pretty straightforward, so that would be great.
Okay. So in this one, we haven't done anything with the relevant on this draft.
No, we
We'll
actually,
do it potentially
yeah.
in the next one.
We actually took out that line because it's in statute. So it doesn't need to be in the rule, it's in statute. If we want to
Okay.
define that later in rule, then we'll just come
can-
back and,
In full board.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions, members? Okay, I will seek a motion.
I'm happy to make that motion.
Thank you.
I move that the committee approves R277-726 Statewide Online Education Program Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the committee approves R277-726 Statewide Online Education Program Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Seeing no hands, those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? That passes unanimously with Member Bogus absent, and we'd like to excuse her today. There are a lot of graduations going on, and she's got a special graduation today, and it's tricky in May to get everybody here. So we will certainly be in communication with her after this meeting to make sure that she's aware of what is happening here. And we do miss her. And numbers 1.3, we're on action R277-419, pupil accounting amendment and continuation. And it looks like we have policy advisor Jennifer Wadsworth, director of data and statistics Aaron Bruff, attendance specialist Garrett Russell, and attendance specialist Megan Menlove, all here for this one rule. Thank you.
Love it.
Who wants to lead out?
Chair, I can start leading out. I believe that Jennifer Wadsworth is unavailable at the moment, so I'm happy to lead out if that's okay.
And we have Deputy Superintendent Elise Newey also
we just
here
have
to
the
support.
whole team.
That's so great. Thank
And I
you.
apologize, my camera is off. I got new updates this morning and it's not loving my camera. So I just wanted to set the stage for this one right now. So we have a series of attendance rules, as you know, that are coming before you today. Partly out of legislative updates that need to be made. We had several bills that addressed attendance in the last legislative session. But I want to take us even further back, just really quickly, to ground us in this conversation, to the attendance audit that came out about a year ago. And one of the major findings or the major recommendations from that audit was that we clarify and use consistent definitions across our school system for attendance related things. And so that's what you're going to see in these rules. I sent out some slides earlier, and those are in the backup if you want to reference those. But each of these rules do kind of different things with the definitions. And so 419 is specifically for pupil accounting. And so this is how do we use students' information and their membership and their attendance to calculate funding. And I want to be clear that actual attendance data does not get used in the state of Utah for funding purposes for ADM. We use average daily membership, and membership is counted by the students who are enrolled. So rather, this is the analogy that Deputy Jones loves to use, but in your gym membership, if you're a member, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going every day, but you are a member. And so that's how we fund schools here in the state of Utah. So the changes that you'll see in 419 are actually just to clarify the definitions of attendance validated programs versus learner validated programs. So this has been something that's been in the rule for a while, but we want to make it extra clear, especially as we're seeing an increase in programs where students can go at their own pace and they are expected to be competent in ideas and in concepts and skills and not necessarily attend a certain amount of days. And so we want to make sure that depending on the program that a student is in, that their membership is being counted in a fair and consistent way, and that is being used across the board in these two different programs. So these programs have existed for quite some time, these definitions, but there was some added language in the legislation this year to clarify them. So that's the only change you'll see in 419.
Okay. Vice Chair Kelly.
Yeah, Deputy Superintendent Newey, are these the changes that are coming as a result of, I don't know if it's Senator or Representative Fillmore's legislation that was passed?
Yes, sir. Yeah, these are directly from his bill, the updated definitions.
And I know there's some concerns about, like, if a student shows up with 5 minutes left of class, they're considered attending, right? Is there room for us to do three? I mean, there's a tardy, there's present, but I know a lot of teachers have expressed concern about saying, well, look, if the student shows up with 5 minutes left of class, technically speaking, they missed class, but yes, they were in attendance. Is there room for us to maybe create a third category of saying, all right, tardy is 0 to 15 minutes. You showed up, you showed up for class. Another category, 15 minutes to, 1 minute left in class versus, they showed up last minute of class. I'm curious if there's room for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Oh, sorry, Chair. May I?
No.
Okay.
Go ahead. My understanding is that this is kind of bifurcated, which I don't think we understood in the last meeting, where the LEA could use like a barely there type of coding, but for the funding and data mechanism purposes and membership purposes, they would be counted there. Is that correct?
Yes, so that's how we're seeing it as well. So there's kind of two different lenses to look at attendance data. And at the classroom level, what you're speaking about, Vice Chair, is we want to make sure that the kid is actually engaged and that they are there and they are a meaningful member of the classroom culture, right? That's kind of what we're wanting to look at. And so, yeah, there needs to be a lot more nuance at the classroom, school, and LEA level to be able to capture the different things that teachers and administrators want to track. At the state level, we're looking more at how many students do we have in the system? What are long-term trends that we're seeing? Should we be making big changes to system-wide things? And so in those cases, the simpler the data, the better it is for us to use and the clearer the data. And so when we're saying that attendance means that they're either there or they're not, and it's an all or nothing, that is only when we're talking about the state level data. What LEAs and schools can do in their SIS system is create all the codes that they want, right? They can create a barely there. They can create they're there, but they are not engaged. Whatever the LEA wants to do. Then when the LEA gathers their data together and they're submitting it up to the state, they're going to essentially translate that into the data that we need, which is, are they there? Are they not? Are they truant? Which is kind of just one of those three buckets.
To Vice Chair Kelly's point, I think every committee member, most, if not all, expressed that same concern that he just expressed. So what you're telling us is that the student is never going to see on the system that they only came for 5 minutes and they were marked only tardy or present. There might be a barely there, or there might even be an absent, or there might be something else. And you're saying that's okay.
That's okay. Yeah, that is up to the LEA. that's still their flexibility to determine what that looks like. And when a student or a parent logs into their individual SIS system to see, they'll see what the LEA wants them to see and how the LEA has coded it. So these definitions are specifically for when the LEA then exports that data up to the state level. What are we looking for?
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any other questions on that, Vice Chair Kelly, or anyone else?
I don't know.
Okay, so the definition for the full day of present or absent, that's in the next rule, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Director Bruff?
I don't mean to jump in, but I'm going to now. Just sharing with the committee members who are here, we recognize your questions, and we've been tackling this, and we do have some charts that we hope are easier to navigate and flow through. It's you see the whole picture of what we're talking about in these different components. So hopefully, I'm just sharing. Hope you recognize that we're not just trying to blow past your concerns. I think we will be addressing all of your questions as we go into it. Again, just going back to this 419 one, which is, this is just for, the submission of these two, the continuous enrollment being either taking attendance or you're doing the learner validated. And we actually do recommend, as we move forward with the LEAs, that we really start tracking this closer down at the school level. Not school, the class or the period level. But that is coming. We'll be showing that, and hopefully somewhat easy to understand visualization. So just letting you know that we've been working pretty hard to make sure that we've covered all those bases for you.
And I was going to ask you to share some helpful graphic representation as we head into 609. Is there a reason that we aren't combining 419 and 607? Just in general?
I can try to answer that.
Okay.
So part of this was actually something that came up in the audit as well, is that 419 is specific for calculating membership. So it's specific for the funding piece, but it does include, there's a lot of permeability, I guess you could say, between the two. So that's one thing we would like to take a longer term look at, how to make those more, to either combine the parts that need to be combined and distinctly separate the parts that need to be separated.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. If there aren't any other questions, I'll seek a motion on this one, and then we'll head into 607 and see some of that graphic representation that I think will be helpful. I don't see any hands.
I could do that.
Okay, thank you.
I move that the committee approves R277-419 pupil accounting draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the committee approves R277-419 pupil accounting draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Seeing no additional hands, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously with Member Bogus absent. Okay, now let's move into 1.4, which is R277-607, Absenteeism and Truancy Prevention Amendment. And we have the same people again to help us with this one. Do you want to start us off, Director Bruff, with that graphic representation?
I am happy to do that. I know that at least.
Or was someone prepared to tell us the crux of the one amendment we need to make?
I think, there's a PowerPoint that Elise put in the backup.
Elise, do you want to summarize the crux of the amendment that we need to work on for this?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so for this one, this rule governs attendance generally. So these are the principles of attendance. What is best practice? What are things that need to be in an LEA's attendance policy? And so one of the things that we are trying to solve for, and this is what the attendance audit got at, this is what Fillmore's bill is trying to get at, is that when there is inconsistency in definitions and how LEAs apply attendance definitions, then we get inconsistency in application of law. So one example that we have seen in the past in the state of Utah is that we have schools that have calculated in the past truancy by class period. And there's a legal threshold that if a student hits 20 truancies, they can then be referred to the legal system. They used to, now it has to be like 40. But if they have 7 truancies and a school calculates truancy by day as opposed to period, then this other student who has gone the same amount of time only has 1 truancy, right? And so that creates legal inconsistency. So at the state level, we have to be really, really clear. And what we're trying to do is be really clear about what the words mean so that when we legally apply them to different situations, then we can do so fairly. So the next slide. Slide down, Cami. Thank you. So, like I said, this is the rule that governs, that application. So when you look down below at the next slide, there's really 3 instances that we're looking at. What should a LEA do to support students in being there and being present? How should they handle excuses for absences? So what is a valid excuse? How does an LEA create a valid excuse? How do they handle that? How do they calculate a full day of absence or not? And then truancy, how do we deal with truancy? So those are kind of the 3 major categories we're looking at the state level. And so we need to get that clear in this rule to make that effective and to make our data effective to look at. And so in this rule today, we are, again, amending the definition so that they match across these 3 rules, including R277-100 that you guys passed during your last meeting, so that they're all the same, that schools understand the calculations, and that we understand what the data is when we get it up at the state level. I did include in the motions doc, as Aaron had, our Director Breff has been talking about, we've been really working through these questions, just like you guys are, that these are really complicated and that there's a lot of unintended consequences. And so we're trying to navigate those in a really fair and thoughtful way. And in our conversation just this week, we realized that one of our problems is that LEAs, they're in the law, it does not talk about unexcused absences. It talks about truancies. It says you're either there, you have an absence with a valid excuse, or you are truant. But that's not how we collect the data at the moment. So what we are proposing, and I put this in the motion doc, that we add to 607 that LEAs need to have in their attendance policy a clear process and timeline for turning unexcused absences in their data collection into a truancy. So as an example, if my daughter is out for a week, I forget to call in, it's an unexcused absence. At what point is the district going to say, okay, now that is no longer an unexcused absence, that is a truancy because you did not clear it, right? You did not provide a valid excuse. What does that look like for the parent? How do I know? What does that look like in the data system? How will that be done equitably and consistently? So that needs to be in the process. And then also, there is a distinction between truancy as an attendance piece of data and truancy as a discipline incident. Both of those are talked about in the law, but they're talked about as 2 different things. So I can have a truancy, right? I just missed school today. That's not a big deal. But then when does it become a discipline infraction that needs to be put into UTREX as a discipline incident? And so we want to make that clear as well. And so what we are suggesting, and you'll see this in parentheses V at the bottom, that an LEA, once a student has reached, they've gone through their process, the unexcused absences have turned into truancies, they've given parents an opportunity to clear it, and they haven't. When they get to 20, that is when they then make a notation in UTREX that there is a truancy as a discipline incident. And so that way you'll start to see consistency in our UTREX data about what truancy means. Because right now there is no rhyme or reason to when LEAs do it. It's inconsistent. And so it doesn't help us at the state level to have consistent data. So those are the things that we're proposing that we add to 607 today, if that's something that the board is interested in, to make our definitions even clearer and more consistent. And that was a lot. I apologize.
Where does the 40 come in? Because I see 20, but then I thought I heard was it Director Breath
So
say
the
40?
law, right now, the law is that a LEA can, so they don't have to, but they can refer a student to the criminal justice system if they have 2 habitual truancies. So a habitual truancy is when they reach that 20 mark. And so it would be 40 to reach that threshold.
Okay, Deputy Superintendent Nui, I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm curious. My concern is, in my mind, truancy is, all right, I'm going to throw myself under the bus here for just a second. All right. When I was a high school student, I used to slough class, and I would go to Tri-City Golf Course, and we would go golf ball hunting. In my mind, that was a truancy, right? In the sense that there's no valid excuse as to why I was missing class. If an administrator, and I feel like administrators oftentimes will catch students sloughing class, okay, and that's a truancy. But if a student has a parent who, if the student is staying at home, they're ill, maybe it's mental illness, maybe it's physical illness, but they're staying at home and the parent is just not taking the initiative to excuse those absences, is that student ultimately going to be punished over the long run with truancies?
That is such a great question. Chair, may I, or
Yes.
there's someone else? So this is exactly the same conversation that we were having. That feels unfair, right? And I think our attendance staff really put it in good words that this would definitely be a shift in the way that adults in the system think about and talk about attendance. So it would definitely be a mindset shift that would be really difficult, I think, to implement. So the other option, if we don't make this consistent now, another option that we could go down is going to the legislature and proposing a different system. Because right now, the trouble that we're running into is that, like I said, in code, it just says that truancy is an unexcused absence. And that's not the way that we really use it colloquially or practically in schools, right? Usually truancy means sloughing. And so do we want to define it so narrowly that it is just sloughing? Or are we taking the code and saying, well, if the code is saying it's just an unexcused absence, then let's start using truant to mean unexcused absent. And then let's maybe create a new term that is talking about what we want to talk about when students maybe are in the school building, but are choosing not to come to class, or at the McDonald's down the street, right? So that's kind of the dilemma that we're in right now. We've chosen to go with the second one to say, okay, we'll define truancy the same way that the legislature does, and then we'll try and shift the conversation. But this is totally a choice for the board to decide, how do we want to take this policy?
Director Breath.
And if I may, kind of sharing is part of the problem is, again, why we're going through these definitions is inside of our incident reporting module and the information that we receive, truancy is there. But trying to make rhyme or reason of what's going on in there has been incredibly difficult, because as we look at it, we can say there are schools that have really high truancy records inside of there. And it appears what's happening is for every class period, secondary, when I say secondary, like a high school, for every class period that the student is unexcused, that they are marking a truant. And so their incident count, if we're just looking at counts, is spiking really high. And as we've been going into it, say, well, the law says for a truancy to be marked, it really needs to be a full day truant. You can't do it for every single class, or you can't penalize. So for example, if a student goes first period, is tardy, and doesn't have an excuse for it, left second period, goes to third period, and then is there for fourth period, but then leaves early, you can't penalize them or say for that day that there were 3 truants. It would be for the day you would take a look at it. Would it be helpful to show the graph that we've been working on for the committee, or do you want to continue to talk about it?
Yes, but remind me, in code, does it say that a truant can only be counted full day? It
The
can't
truancy is you can only have 1 truant for a day.
via code.
Big Garrett tag team.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
Somewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
let's look at the graph. But is this why we're doing the 50% more or less, because of the truant full day definition needs? Or is it just in general? Is while you're pulling up that graph, Director Bruff, I'll say that the code was clear on how the classes should be coded, but the code was silent on what constitutes a present or an absent for the full day. And I reached out to Senator Fillmore at Chair Hymas's request, and he said, yes, that is something that needs to be delineated, and he would be supportive of our board looking at how to delineate that. And he would also be supportive if we feel that we need to request a change in code or a delineation in code, he'd be willing to talk about that as well. So that's where we're at right now, is trying to figure out how to define a full day, present or absent. And go ahead, Director Bruff.
Yeah, and by the way, Sharon, I've reviewed this with other people late last night, and they gave me wonderful recommendations on how to improve it. I didn't have a chance to get to do those recommendations. So with that, just know that we're trying our best to get this. And we have shared this graph with about 4 LEAs, kind of getting their initial feedback saying, does this make sense? So.
And what was that feedback?
Actually, they're very appreciative of what we were sharing with them.
Okay.
Excuse me, I interrupt someone there.
I think it was Vice Chair Kelly, maybe.
Yeah, it's okay. I was actually gonna piggyback on Chair Davis's question, but are there amendments that we can propose that would achieve what you're asking?
That's a great question, and I have to go back and look at what the amendments are. I believe that the way we've grafted this out, we're going through and making those definitions. What we're doing, again, is presenting to you based upon our reading of code, recommendations and board rule, and then feedback from the LEAs, how this would work. I'll just kind of draw your attention down to that bottom line that I've just highlighted. This is basically what the parent and the student would see within their SIS saying, hey, for whatever period, if it's a kindergarten or if it's a secondary where it's a, in the AB schedule, or if it's 7 schedule, whatever it is, for that class period, they would basically get, are you in full attendance? Were you tardy? We know some places have like that barely there, or late, or left, or whatever it is mark. And then you have the absent. So this is kind of showing, well, what would the student, again, parents see? These 3, the tardy, the barely there, the absent, these categories need to go through a process of being excused by a parent or by the school, depending on the situation. And that has a time factor to it. But again, what we're sharing inside of here is, if you are tardy or barely there, you're present. And so if we move this up into the aggregate onto a 4-period A day, B day process, or in this case, first period, the student was absent, 100% gone. Second period and third period, they were there. And then fourth period, they were absent. On the day calculation, so moving up, this is kind of like, well, how would you determine, is this for the full day? Were they present or were they absent? So it's at least 50% of the school day that are there, then for the day calculation, they would be attendant. Now, if this is like, for example, if you had an extra one over here where there's 3 days that they were sorry, 3 periods that they were absent, then the calculation would say, student absent for more than 50% of the day, then it would be an absent mark. The LEA at this point doesn't know, is this an excused or unexcused? Because there's some timing issues behind that. And that's why we have this line down here at the bottom going over to the right, which basically says for the tardies, for the barely there's, for the absent, for the unengagement, for the learning validated programs and such, you really have to take it through a decision process. Is this an excused absence, missing, disengagement, whatever? That's what you need to figure out. And is it coming from a parent or is it coming from the school? Is there some sort of activity going on? They've been called to the office. What's going on? Are they part of a sports team? That's what needs to be determined. Again, parents' excuse period would be up to the LEAs. Is that a 5-day period? Is that a 10-day grace period based upon the LEA's recommendation or their policy of how much time that they give for parents to respond to it? If there's no excuse, then it becomes truant. And then for truant, for these calculations, truant, a student truant for more than 50% of the day means the day will be calculated as a truant. And that would be what they'd be submitting into the state. And when I say submitting into the state, the reality is once they get 20 truants, and this is where this comes over here into the unexcused, where it says what's happening on the day, it's a truant. And then there's some different rules based upon for K through 6 through compulsory education. It's a 5-day, and there's some recommendations coming as we review that of what we recommend to do with the K6. But there's also the 7th through 12th grade where there's a truancy violation, which is for those grades, if you have 20 of them, then it's called habitual truant, and that should be marked inside of the incident as, okay, there you are. There's one truant, which again, by definition would mean not just for the day, but there are 20 incidents. The office, the principal, vice principal, whoever has actually sat down and said, okay, we're marking this as, again, 20 incidents, and here's the incident in the system, and that would go up, and that's how we would be counting that. If we come back over here, basically what would happen is on the truancy though, when you start doing the unexcused or the excused absence on it, you'd be looking at, say, well, what is happening here? And the LEAs would have to wait maybe, again, 5 days, 10 days before this one really starts getting filled and updated what is going on inside of here. But again, what the law states is the LEAs need to start tracking two main things. Item number 1 is the chronic absenteeism, which is total days attended plus the total days absence divided by, reversed. The total days absent divided by the total days attendance plus the total days absent after 60 days of continuing enrollment. If they reach 10% or more, then they are chronically absent. And the LEAs need to track that throughout the year and have interventions in place when a student becomes chronic absent, or even if they start approaching on the early warning system saying, hey, you need to be aware of this real time, so you're doing things to address that. Likewise,
Can you say the formula again?
Yeah. So basically what you're doing, you're getting the total of days attended and days absent. So that's your full day. It's not quite membership, but it's pretty close to the same thing as membership. That's your total. You're just taking the total numbers of days, both excused and unexcused, divided by the days attended plus the days absence. They have to be enrolled for at least 60 days before this would kick in. And then the calculation for chronic absenteeism is if you are missing 10% or more, then you are considered chronically absent for that school year. Does that help?
Yes, I have a question though. So on the left-hand side where the green is,
Mm-hmm.
so the green and the red, I should say, the left half. So say this is my daughter and
Okay.
she is absent. So one of my kids right now is a senior.
Okay.
She's absent first period. Then she attends second and third period. Then she's gone fourth period, but because she was on the soccer team, then for that next quarter, whatever, she didn't have a fourth period. So up above this says 50% of the school day, but in something else I thought I read 50% of the assigned classes. Is there a distinction there? Because she technically is there for 2/3 of her assigned classes, but only 50% of the total school day.
So she would be considered present for the day based on these calculations.
Even though above it says 50% of the school day, because it's her school day.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And it's that student's classes configuration. Now, Garrett just popped on his camera and maybe he has something else to say. I want to just make sure I didn't say something wrong.
Garrett, do you have something to add?
No, I've been on. I might have just like flipped over on your screen, but yeah, and I guess one thing to add would just be that in a case where it's exactly 50%, we would lean towards the student being present versus them being absent in those days, if that helps as well.
Okay.
So greater than equal to in benefit of the student. I mean, it's only one.
Like in this case, in the graph that's in front of us, when they attend 2 periods and they miss 2 periods, they're still considered attended.
For
Yes.
the day, they're considered attended, but they could still be truant for that day when they say still truant because you still have the tardy definitions that you have to deal with in the belly there. So if they're sloughing half the class or showing up really late, there's still a mechanism for the truancy to come through.
Because there's no
in the
parent
middle there,
excuse.
if they miss first period and fourth period, and they were tardy for second period, they could be considered absent or truant.
Truant, but attended for the day, which
Yeah, attended for
makes
the day, but
calculating incredibly straightforward, as you can see.
so it is like we're sharing, it is 3 different kind of calculations or concepts that we need to look at. And so instead of saying, well, everything, a truant doesn't mean absent based on this definition. The truant means one, it's unexcused. And they are disengaging, sloughing, they're not there for whatever reason it is, but it's unexcused. That's what takes you down to the truancy column.
So like on the right-hand side where it says day truant, is the red circle first period truant, the next down blue circle second period school
No,
excused, or that's not it?
That's one of the fallacies of this chart right now. They're like, wait, because we were in the
Okay.
process of saying we should have some more examples of how to actually track through it. But the concept is simply right through here is what happens if you have a scenario on a single class? How do you start calculating it? And really, that's what this is intended to do. Again, that was the feed and sharing the committee. This the feedback from the group is there's probably a couple of charts that we could put together, especially when we present this to the LEAs and what these how these formulas and calculations should be understood.
So if they're not excused, they're considered truant, whether it's a tardy or a
rarely there.
Oh, wait, how's that going to work? Then our parents going to have to start excusing all the tardies?
My understanding is they already do.
I don't.
Or they don't, right?
I excuse the absences, but not
Or they don't, right? So for example,
even if it's an excused, I don't.
if you are tardy, well, why? Well, is it because the doctor's office was full and you couldn't get out in time to get to class and you're a little bit late? That's an excuse tardy. You're still there at class because you were intended for most of the class. Or are you just late and mom or dad is not going to excuse you? Hence, that goes into there's an unexcused tardy there. That's kind of the difference between, again, applying this to all schools, all scenarios. So we're trying to say, okay, but the flexibility really is within the schools and within the LEA's policy. What does that mean? Again, our definition that the state really cares about when we get our records is the day where they're dealing with each of those classes.
So if the student is present for at least 50% of the day, they are considered present. If
For that
this,
day attended, yeah.
Or attended, yeah. I don't know the present, attended.
sorry, they are considered attended. And those could be even for a small amount of the day. If they are less than 50% of the day attendance, then they're considered absent. And what we're doing today is using the 50% mark as the determiner. And how does that change the status quo, and what are the pros and cons of it?
The current recommendation or current process via Utrex is if you are present for any part of the day right now, you are considered in attendance. So that's the difference between what's now and what we're recommending. So right now, when they submit, it's like, well, if the kid was in first period, but they missed second, third, and fourth period, the LEA would still be submitting, well, they were in attendance.
Okay.
For a full day.
So
we recommend changing that to 50%.
And this is not going to impact funding until it affects membership, which is when?
Membership is the 10-day unexcused absent is when an LEA needs to go in and say, they do due diligence, and if they can't find the student, they have to unenroll them.
Now,
Except for special ed,
I heard that was an option. They may unenroll them, but they don't have to unenroll them via code. Is it a shall or a may?
It's a shall. If you cannot connect with the family for 10 days, that you do not know where they're at. And again, there's a special ed subcategory, which is 30 days. So let's not confuse that. Let's just acknowledge it's there. But if a student, let me restate that, if the LEA or the school loses contact with a student over a 10-day period, there's no communication, they've reached out, they're finding they don't know what's going on, then they need to unenroll them. You can always re-enroll the student after that period, but that is where that 10-day unenrollment, and that then goes into the funding, because that's membership. You're unenrolling their membership.
Okay.
And Lisa has...
Deputy Newey, yeah, help me understand what we talked about yesterday, because I'm trying to fit the two in my brain.
Yeah, so that's one of those weird legal distinctions. So, and Vice Chair Kelly asked a similar question, like, are there any legal ramifications for these truancies? And I think it's important to note that there is a lot of discretion that is given to administrators for all of these scenarios. So what Director Bruff was saying is true. It is they shall drop it, but only after the administrators feel like they have done their due diligence. So that is up to the administrators to say, here are the things that we're going to try, here are the things we're going to do, and then make that call. The difficult policy
line that we're trying to walk is we don't want schools keeping students on their rolls long after they've moved to some other school and some other school is getting a WPU for them and they're getting double counted, right? We call them like ghost students that we're trying to avoid that, but also give enough time and flexibility and discretion to administrators to really figure out where kids are and to support them and their families. Same thing with a truancy. So with truancy, there are laws in place that when they reach that 2 habitual truant threshold, that an LEA may reach out to the legal system and, put into place different interventions and different referrals to the legal system. But again, that's only at the discretion of the administrator about what that looks like. And so there's no automatic trigger that if a student has 40 truancies on the books, that something bad will happen or some consequence at all will happen to that student. It really still stays in the hands of the administrator.
They don't have to send the student to the judge. It's
No.
just an option after 2 truants in 40 days, but they must unenroll a student after 10 days of absent. And this
Unexcused absences,
unexcused absences.
which again is an interesting timing issue.
Okay, what's this gonna change on the ground for schools? Garrett has his hand up.
And for the 10 unexcused, I just want to add that it is consecutive. So like if they show up at day 9, then that would restart that count as well. So it's not just 10 overall, it's 10, has to be 10 consecutive unexcused absences. And 30 for if they have an IEP.
Okay. Looking at baseline data from what we have from schools right now, how many students are going to be unenrolling? How many students do we have out there that have 11 unexcused absent days and then show up, 10 or more and then show back up?
I don't know because we
Oh,
don't
what
get
percentage
data.
of?
We
Okay.
don't actually have that level of detail in the submission that we get right now within our systems. So to say how
Okay.
many, the answer is I don't know.
You
We
don't
have the end of the year where those enrollments that overlap, there's a proration and lots of double checking and saying how many days of membership is allowable at the end of the year. So sharing on the membership and the funding side of it, this actually is not having a huge impact on what they do at all on the funding. A lot of that is already in place and well-established practices. And then I'll let Megan answer the second part.
I was just going to mention that it does enroll them, it disenrolls them from the class, but it stays on their cohort. So what you might be thinking of, members, is that they're dropping these students, so they're still part of their cohort. So these students still stay within that LEA until another LEA picks them up. So when people ask us those questions, we get this question a lot, quite often, of like, why would we drop them if they're going to stay on our cohort? And that's part of the conversation, is that they do stay within that cohort until another LEA picks that student up.
So they're counted toward membership even if they're unenrolled until they enroll somewhere else?
That's a different thing. That's cohort graduation tracking, which is a
Yes.
4-year problem, not just a single-year problem.
Okay.
So that's
And
that's
say
additional.
say the kid is sick, but the parent won't excuse the absence or something, and the kid comes back in 12 days. Are they going to have to re-enroll in all of their classes, or are they going to lose their spot in their classes?
That's a great LEA level question. Truthfully, if the student, if once the LEA knows what's going on, like in the scenario you just gave, the student's sick, but I'm not excusing them. okay, that's kind of weird. But then the student comes back in, a lot of times that enrollment is it just restarts. So even if the LEA drops it, and then there's a break for like a 2-day in their enrollment period. So instead of having what happens into our UTREC system and ultimately into the USIM system is instead of having a single membership, they would have 2 membership enrollment records coming in for the year. And that's pretty typical of what we see when someone is unenrolled for whatever purposes, for this disengaging, disappearing, where it's like, okay, here's the end. We stop it here. We did our due diligence. Oh, they came back. They typically re-enroll. Now, charter schools, that might be slightly different when there's a lottery involved with it. And that's kind of a reality of going to a charter school. And if you stop going and there's a lottery, then there's a possibility that they've lost their spot there. Lots of complexities, but just sharing is, yes, there's a reality there for a lottery process where there's multiple students trying to get into the charter school. So you could see it, but again, there's 10 consecutive unexcused. We don't know what happened to the kid. 34 special ed. That's the unenrollment threshold.
Okay. So you've got, say you have a kid whose parents are uninvolved and they're not going to excuse one way or another. They need to get involved and this will force them to get involved. But you feel for the kids whose parents just won't. But let's just say that a child for 10 days misses first and second period and comes 2 minutes late to third period and gets marked tardy and is fully present for fourth. So is there almost 50%, but because of the unexcused tardy pushes it to the less than, that happens 10 days in a row, they get unenrolled from school.
No, you've got an active exchange with them. It's 10 full days of there's nothing going on. There's no contact.
Even though they're going to be marked as a day absent, unexcused on this red column.
Correct.
So
Yeah,
we
and
need
that's kind of
something in the
have
chart that shows some contact or something somewhere.
That's a good point. I think that's kind of our challenge with the different reasons we have the data collection at the different levels, right? We don't really care about the 10-day rule up here. So if we have 10 absences, that's just a data point. But how schools are tracking that and abiding by that law at a local level is different. And I also want to make it clear that nothing actually in the rules that we're changing today change anything about the 10-day rule. It's more about that has always existed and schools are still functioning under that law and would continue.
So what will this change? If we set this 50% criteria, what is it going to change for LEAs?
How they submit, from my understanding, and Director Braff, correct me, is how they submit their data to us, what that looks like when they hand it off to us. They can still make a lot of choices about how nuanced or how individualized it looks like on the ground. And it shouldn't change anything about what students and families are seeing in their own attendance.
And this will never change membership unless the school, I mean, if they try 5 times to call the parent and they don't call them back, they have to unenroll them, even if the kid shows up on the 11th day.
Which then they would re-enroll them. But yeah, and that's been the
It
existing
would only be
policy.
1 day of member ADM lost.
So it wouldn't impact, yeah.
And sharing, if I may, I'm sorry, we're just jumping in here. Conversationally, I can go back to raising my hand if you want.
No, it's fine. And I'm scanning too to see if members are raising their hands too. So
really what this changes, this has to get everyone with similar definition for chronic absenteeism, how to mark and submit that to the state. What is the unified definition for attendance versus absence, and updating on recommendation. What would a truant submission in an incident look like? Instead of, for example, it's just coming with a unified definition. Don't send us every period's truant mark as a discipline, send it to us by a day when you have 20. We don't want to receive every single day that your student is truant at the state level. That's not useful on the incident side. What's useful on the incident side is when they're hitting certain thresholds that different actions could be taken. And so as we show, for example, for the parent dashboard, when it says how many truancies are inside of, that are coming from the school, the definition will be how many habitual truancies are we seeing coming from the school based upon this definition of a full day of a truancy, not a class period truancy. Because right now, if I pull up a report and I say Brighton High School has this obscene spike in truancies versus an elementary school that's like really close to it has barely none, it's trying to make sure that what we're looking at has some uniformity and unified definitions of what these mean. Right now, they don't. That's
Okay,
what.
thank you. Thank you so much. Seeing no hands, I am seeking a motion. If someone will.
Do you want to bring that back up? There you go.
Go for it. Cole, if you're willing.
Yeah, it's 1.4, right?
Yes.
All right. I move that the committee approve R277607 absenteeism and truancy prevention draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the committee approves R277-607 absenteeism and truancy prevention, draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Seeing no hands, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously with Member Bogus absent. And I just want to thank staff for being patient through our questions so that we can explain when we're asked to our folks in our local levels what's going on. Also want to mention that Deputy Superintendent Jones and Assistant Superintendent Deborah Jacobson are missed today as well. They have very important things happening in their family circles, and we wish them well, and we'll look forward to seeing them next time. Okay, 1.5, we're on R277-484 Data Standards Amendment. We have Director Bruff and Policy Advisor Wadsworth again, and maybe Deputy Nui, but your name wasn't on this one, so are you leading out on this one too?
I can do this as well. It's
okay.
The same conversation that we're having, Chair, about absenteeism and attendance data. 484 is our rule that governs how LEAs turn in their data. So this is really kind of the meat of our conversation is what does this look like when they hand it over to us? So we wanted to make sure that those definitions for their data submissions look the same as 607 and 419 and R277-100. So all of this just aligns together. Those are the only changes you'll see today as far as I know. Director Bruff, anything else to add?
Nope, I think that's pretty clear. We're lining all these together.
Thank you. I don't see any hands, so I'll seek a motion on this definition alignment rule.
I'm happy to make that motion.
Thank you, Member Booth.
I move that the committee approves R277-484 Data Standards, Draft 1 on first reading, and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
There's a motion on the floor that the committee approves R277-484 Data Standards Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Seeing no hands, those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? That passes unanimously with Member Bogus absent. Okay, we are on what, 1.6? legislative funding request information. Let's see. Director Sam Uri is here, and he's leading us out on this.
Yes, good afternoon. School Finance Director Sam Uri, hoping to do a decent job trying to fill in for Deputy Jones and Assistant Superintendent Jacobson. As you know, even though it feels like session just ended, we are gearing up for the budgetary asks as we go into our next legislative session. And we've got a couple of backups here. The 26 to 27 budget comparison here is a high level comparison of the MSP as a whole, the MSP by funding source. That one gets a little tricky with some of the property tax projections and things of that nature. So really, it's maybe more helpful to focus on the MSP as a whole increase of about 4% and the overall budget increase of about 4%, following the 4.2% WPU increase with some program eliminations and streamlining of different programs. But I just wanted to make this available to you as board members as you look at making your budgetary recommendations to the governor, who then ultimately makes his recommendations to the legislature. We also have the public education summary and backup if there are any programs that you want to look through, specifically the quick view here on the second or third page. Scroll down. There we go. Sorry, the 9th page. Shows the 4.2% WPU increase, the 4% MSP increase. And if we go down to page 29, it does compare each of those individual programs in the MSP, and then we scroll down here. We can see some of those what we call related to basic programs, some of the more categorical type items as we go through there. So just wanted to provide those to you by way of support. We're here as staff to help research and come up with costs for proposals and anything that board members would like us to look at or research. But I believe this is an action item so that board members could make motions at this time to begin that process.
Thank you. I am looking for hands of members. Do we have our requests from last year that we need to consider if we want to continue to request or not? Or if not, can we ask that those be brought to the next meeting?
I believe those are on our website. I can pull the link up here. Sorry, just give me one moment and I can navigate there. Um, well, while I pull that up, we can definitely bring that to the next meeting if
Okay.
I'm not able to quickly find it here. But
Um,
it's
I'd also like to have some more detail on information about the costs to fund our self-contained students at a 2.5 W, at a, I mean, we could do a scale, but at a
okay.
2.5 WBU. And I don't know if we need to vote on each of these requests or if I think individual members can ask for information for potential requests. Um, Chair Hymas, are you okay with that? I think that's what we've done in the past, but I just want to make sure we're following protocol. Member Booth?
Thank you. I would just like to request that we have an opportunity to discuss as a board, and particularly right here in the committee, what feedback have we received from our areas, in terms of what happened in the last session and what were the biggest concerns from our local areas, from our local administrators, from scores of parents and partners in business and in our communities, for any of the programs that were on the big list of recommended cuts. That would be helpful as we are trying to determine what should be our top 5, our top 10 priorities, and where do we want to continue to hold the line, or where do we want to make adjustments. But we certainly all received a lot of feedback on 2 or 3 key areas. But it would be interesting to know what else they're saying at the local level in terms of what we did in this most recent, or what we weren't able to do in this most recent session as we prepare for the next. How could we do
So,
that?
correct me if I'm wrong. Are you asking staff to bring feedback back to this committee for an agenda item where we talked about what's working and not working and local feedback? It sounds like we would need to get that from maybe the state charter school board and the local board, organization of local boards, and then members could bring their own as they ask their own folks and have that be a part of our awareness during these discussions. Is that what I'm understanding from you?
I think that would be very helpful. Yes, thank you.
Okay, Chair Hymas?
Yeah, thank you. I hear what Randy's saying. I'm worried because some things aren't as out there as others. For example, right on here on our screen, the NES. I'm not going to hear back from parents and constituents that we need NES, right? We're going to hear all the things like POPs and BTS and science, and so we have to be careful of and I know that Randy hears more than I do and hears from all of his people and organizations, but I just want to again bring caution to saying what are we hearing from in our emails and things of that nature, because sometimes those who need the money aren't necessarily the loudest, right? And we kind of saw this with even the state charter school board. I don't know if any of you received any emails saying, "Hey," or from people saying, "Hey, we have to save this," right? But there were legislators and there were charter members who were saying, "No, we need to save this." So, and then to answer your question earlier, Cindy, yeah, I think as we bring it through here, I don't think it needs to be it could be one person saying, "Hey, I want to put this forward," and then we can move to send it on to the board. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. You're saying we can request the information to come here, but it's up to the committee to decide if they want to further it to the full board.
I think so. I wish we had Scott because I just want to go off of historical, what we've done in
Sure,
the
I do
past. I
too.
don't want to make any changes now, and I'm not as familiar with this process as he is, or maybe even
Okay.
Sam or somebody else.
Yeah, and are you familiar with, I mean, are you comfortable with what Randy's requesting if staff does gather some feedback from state charter board and the local district boards, those two representatives, and then we can just add the things that we hear because they certainly would be familiar with NES and the other things,
Right.
like our parents may not, but we could add what we hear from other to that conversation. Are you comfortable with that?
Absolutely comfortable with gathering as much information from as many sources as possible.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Member Booth.
I really resonate with what Matt's saying in terms of the loudest voices are not necessarily what we need to be most concerned about. Um, but I really would welcome a conversation where I don't want to miss anything. And Ness is not at the top of my list, but it's so important. Uh, and and so somebody needs to help us open our eyes or listen to this specific thing or whatever other uh, program so that we really have some means of determining what must our priorities be. How is this going to impact students and how many students, and what will the end result be if we don't salvage this, or is there really reason to not have this program? Would it be okay? Would life go on and the students will be okay? They may certain ones, but I just want to get more information because there's this list. As you look at it, it's voluminous, and some of the titles, oh yeah, I know about that, I know about that, I know about that. But some of them you go, okay, I have absolutely no idea what that really means for how many students across the state.
Yeah, I appreciate those. Thank you. I have a question about the data on the first chart. Oh, did I hear someone, Vice Chair
I
Kelly?
just,
Oh,
Chair
no,
Davis,
Sam. Go
I
ahead.
was able to locate that file in on our website. There's a link in the chat that we can pull up as far as the board's prioritized funding requests last year.
Okay, and right before we do that, can I ask a quick question? Am I correct in understanding that initial data that you put on the screen that there was a 4% increase in public education budgets, but only
Yes.
1% increase in state funds and 12% increase in property tax funds? And because they are weighted differently, is how we get to 4%. But overall, and what about federal? Was federal in there also?
Federal was there as well. That's the 26 to 27 budget comparison.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, I
so
see federal there. So federal
yeah,
was
I
no increase
I
almost.
do want to caution though that
Well, no, that's not true. 13.
you know the property taxes at this point are projections, right? And so we need to realize that, with the state guarantee on certain things, we we have state appropriations as they are, but things can fluctuate quite a bit just depending on property tax collections, enrollments, and those sorts of things. Um, the mix of property tax versus state funds will vary. We don't know exactly where things will end up. And so that's just what those forecasts are right now. But it is safe to assume an overall 4% increase in the public education budget. Is that helpful?
And a 13% increase. Am I seeing that right in federal? Is that a projection?
Yes.
That's a projection for coming.
Yes. It does represent an overall much smaller, piece of the pie for LEAs. Traditionally, it's between 7 and 10%, but we do see some increase in federal funding.
So we got rid of the Department of Education and increased the money from federal government. Well, we didn't really get rid of the Department of Education, but we splintered it up quite a bit, but increased. It's interesting that there was the increase there. Okay, let's go ahead and, if we don't have other members have questions on this chart, let's go ahead and have can we look at those requests, our funding requests from last time? And this is what we narrowed to after we were
That's
asked to do
correct,
the
yeah.
exercise, right? We narrowed it to these 5.
That's correct.
It's interesting that we had one-time funds given to hire personnel. I mean, to continue, we may need to ask for one-time funds again. And if we want to see this get off the ground, it's hard to make a huge difference with these aides in the classroom for 1 year.
Chair Davis, if I can just clarify that these are where the board asks. We did see the support staff line item for FTE here at USBE saw an ongoing cut, but a one-time kind of replacement. But the items that you see here on the screen were what the board requests for, not necessarily what was actually funded.
Oh, how do we see these juxtaposed to what was funded?
So we could prepare something. I can give you a high-level overview.
Okay.
The paraprofessional program, I think if you ask the legislature, they feel like with Senate Bill 241, the early literacy package, they kind of addressed that item, right? Beverly Taylor Sorensen did not see an increase. To my knowledge, K through 8 literacy numeracy was not, funded specifically in any way, shape, or form. The critical FTE funding requests were not funded. And I believe there was that one-time funding for master pilot program. I can quickly
There
look
was
that
some.
up, but so I guess you could say maybe 2 out of those 5 items were addressed, numbers 1 and 5.
And 2 did not receive any reductions, but stayed status quo. BTS.
Yes, I believe that's
And
correct.
numbers 3 and 4 didn't get traction.
Correct.
Okay. I don't see any hands from members. I think it would be helpful next time we meet to see these juxtaposed to the actual funding that came in from these top 5 requests.
Okay, yeah, we could prepare that. Beverly Taylor Sorensen in 26 was funded 19.4 million, and it's the exact same for 27.
Okay. I don't see any hands, so I don't know that we need any action items other than those requests for information to come back next time. If I'm missing anyone, jump in and speak up.
Chair, may I ask Matt a question?
Yes.
Matt, from your experience on the Hill during the last session, how much what would be most helpful for the legislators who because of who they are and what they're hearing from their constituents already have a pretty strong agenda and know what they want to do? How much should we be lobbying for or prioritizing? Or is that just looked upon as necessary? We got to listen, we got to listen to what they have to say, but we still know what we need to do. I don't know, I don't want to spend too much time on things that they don't really need or want in terms of our recommendations. And I wasn't there not even a fraction of what you were there. What's your overall feeling?
Chair, you good?
Yes.
So the legislator, the overall was not necessarily about the items, the item numbers, right? You're going to have legislators agree or disagree. They're going to receive the pressure from different vendors or lobbyists. So the item was less important than the way we go about it or the way we have historically gone about it. And that is, we typically, you can see at the bottom here, this is after cutting it down significantly. We're close to 75 million, just asking for 75 million. And when we first started this, it was 10 items, and I can't remember what it was. Sometimes we go to 300 million, sometimes we go to 500 million. Well, that's just unrealistic. And so the legislators are saying, what does the board really need? We want to support the board, but 500 million, that's not going to happen. So the feedback I got was, if you want an item, we can help get that item, but you have to show us where you're going to get the money from. And so that's why we've had the conversations. Where does this come from? So if we're saying, the WPU, that's kind of built in. We don't have to find money for that. They've told us that that's part of the built-in process. But we have Beverly BTS at 1.7. If we want to do that, and typically we ask for 10, 20 million. If we want to do 10 or 20 million, we need to say we want to take X amount out of the master pilot and put it towards BTS. They want us to balance the budget so that they don't, according to how we see need, what we actually prioritize, because right now we prioritize just by putting it at the top of the list. When a true priority is saying, well, what are you willing to cut? If you're prioritizing, what are you willing to cut? So Randy, a longer answer than you probably asked for, but that's what they're looking for is a way to not just ask for money, but to help them balance and see what we truly do prioritize.
Thank you.
I think that's an important bit of counsel in terms of how we go about carrying on the discussion, both here and when we get to the full board. We do need to not just prioritize or say this is critical, but this is critical enough that we're willing to give that up if that's our only way of achieving what is critical. So if it's those FTEs that we need for USBE, we've got to say, okay, I love BTS, but we might have to, if this is more critical, if these FTE needs are more critical than 4,000 kids in these specific schools are going to have to go away, we might have to do that. And those will be hard conversations, but we need to have those conversations.
Thank you. Vice Chair Kelly.
Yeah, I wanted to address Board Member Booth and Chair Davis. At your recommendation, I attended the graduation for the School for the Deaf and Blind yesterday, and
Good.
what a
Pretty
treat!
special.
Yeah, what a treat! And what I can, Member Booth, one of the things that I think you and I agree on is that these extracurricular programs And for you, your passion is art and music, and for me, my passion is athletics and those extracurricular activities. But every single one of the students at that graduation talked about either the volleyball team or the basketball team or the art program or the opportunity to go to Japan. A lot of those extracurricular activities and what they were able to really learn and the attributes they were able to develop through those programs. And so I think it's incumbent upon us as a board to really make sure that we sell to our legislature how critical some of those programs are. And Member Booth, you've been influential in helping me see the wisdom of BTS and the impact that it has on a lot of our K through 6 students. And I think we've got to refine our message in terms of what we share with our legislators in terms of how we move forward and helping them understand that, test scores on standardized testing is an important element of what we do. The attributes and the skills and the interaction that kids are having in those extracurricular programs are just as critical, even though they're not as measurable as a standardized test. So,
Agree.
Appreciate all those thoughts, and those are insightful reminders. Thank you for the conversation, and seeing no hands, we're going to move to our next agenda item with the understanding that those requests will come back that we asked for during this meeting. So thank you. Let's go to 1.7, the School Children's Trust Quarterly Report. And I thought that this was changed to an information item. Looks like it's still on as an action item. But seeing the pros and the cons, let's have School Children's Trust Director Paula Plant help share some information with us and answer some questions. I know this has been a topic of conversation quite a bit in the last little while.
Thank you. Is Cami sharing or do I need to share?
I can share if you'd like.
Please. Thank you, Cami. Okay, so I'm going to go through just a couple of follow-up reports, recommendations that are requests that have come from the board to let you know where we are as a team on those, and I'll do that really quickly. The first thing is that the board has directed this the Trust Lands Advisory Committee that advises the State Board of Education to go through rule and code and see what we can do to simplify and clarify. And we have been working on that over the past year, and the work continues. I do want to report that there were significant changes made in the December board meeting that had to do with rule changes. We did take to the legislature a couple of items that came out of that discussion. So Cami, we're on the third slide. Yeah, thank you. And these first two items are items that the board supported. The first one was clarification, just like you had asked us to do. There were changes that had to be made in code. The second one has to do with the Land Trust Protection Advocacy Office, and this is the office that watches out and on all transactions, all actions that have to do with the trust. They watch it very closely on your behalf and on behalf of the other beneficiaries. We did take a couple of changes to the legislature that did not pass. The first one, this charter piece, there was no opposition And I believe that if we take it as a standalone bill for a new legislator, we will get it through in the next session. The second one had to do with trying to help small districts where many of their population are teachers, to allow teachers who are also parents to serve in parent roles on the council. That did not pass, and the legislature basically told us parent involvement is very important to us, and we want councils to try. Then if they need to request an exemption, there's a process to do that. These last two pieces I'm not going to really discuss because in the interest of time, but they're important to the trust administration. And if you'll go to the next slide, the next thing that I felt like we ought to be reporting back to you is that you may recall that in the March meeting, we asked for an exemption to rule to allow the schools and LEAs to complete their final reports. We had a little bit of a glitch with our website and it didn't allow them enough time. So you did extend that for us. And I just want to report back that all but one district has completed that responsibility. The one district that hasn't has had a business administrator that hasn't been well. So that will happen soon, I believe. The next slide has to do with our compliance monitoring responsibilities. Again, I'm not going to go into this in detail because we will do a consolidated compliance report in a couple of months. But I do want to point out that on that, the item number, so I had to do our responsibility for carryover. You may recall we've had schools that are carrying over large amounts of money instead of spending it on the current year students. We institute a compliance process where if schools at the end of the year, when they submit their final report, if they're carrying over more than 10%, they lost their funding. And by doing that, we were able to reduce the number of schools that were carrying over their funds to half. And I believe in this coming year, it will be even better because having done it once, they believe that it's truly going to happen. And then the next slide is just to make you aware, these are the two boards that watch out and protect and administer the trust so that it is revenue producing for our public schools. The CIFO or the fund office had, these are their board members. Board member Zucker was filling an unexpired term of 6 years. He only served for 5 years. The nominating committee met and made a recommendation. He was one of their recommendations. The state treasurer has reappointed him to a 6-year term. In the case of the Trust Lands Administration, Brian Harris is actually completing a 6-year term. Tiffany James is going to retire from her position a year early. So the nominating committee in this process, the nominating committee submits at least 2 names to the governor. The governor then makes an appointment and then those individuals are confirmed by the Senate. So 2 names for each of those positions have gone forward to the governor and we're waiting to hear on approval. So we know who those board members are. These next 2 items are, I just want to be clear that we don't generally bring these kind of items to the board. We rely on both of the administrations to do their work and to do their work well, and also on the advocacy office who watches very carefully all transactions and preparations for transactions. This first piece is connected to the book list discussion that's been going on. And so I'm going to do this part first, and then I will explain to you how the 2 are connected. But this is another unprecedented kind of transaction. I think and because it's large and a lot of money, I think it's important for you to be aware. You may be aware of a research project that has been going on at the University of Utah for about the past 5 years, I believe, called Forge. It's been in the news some. And it is a research project. They received a grant from the federal government, and it was to do some research on geothermal energy. So they leased some parcels of school trust land. And as you would hope in a research project, they actually found hot rock that could produce energy. It's really kind of exciting. Of course, since all they had was a surface lease, by the time you discover a resource, then if you try to renew your lease, it's going to cost more because you are aware of a higher value. In addition to that, the University of Utah wants to be able to control that particular parcel, as they want it to be in their portfolio. And so we are looking to do a land exchange between the University of Utah Trust and the Public School Trust so that they can retain that parcel. I do think it's exciting to let you know that they had a larger footprint in the original lease, but as they actually found revenue producing hot rock is basically what it is. There are entities that, of course, wanted to be able to go and produce, because this is a research project that's not part of the arrangement. So the University of Utah reduced their footprint in the original lease to what they actually need to do to continue with their research process, and they released the other property. The other property is now under a lease with another group that you may have read about called Fervo, and they are actively experimenting and are ready to go into commercial production on those properties for the school children. What we're going to do with this parcel that is part of the research project is we're going to do an exchange between the University of Utah Trust and the Public School Trust. So Cami, if you'll go to the next slide, I'll try to show you where this is located. So you can see two red squares here, and I know that they're not very big, but I just want you to know generally where this is. The parcel that's in Beaver County, that is where the Forge project is happening. So that's the parcel that we will be trading to the University of Utah. So when we do a trade, we've got to trade for something that the university has in their portfolio. And this is important and is a little bit important in the next discussion as well, is because you can sell surface, you cannot sell minerals. You can trade minerals, but you cannot sell them. So since this parcel, what we're looking to trade, what they care about is what's under the ground, not what's on top of the ground. We need to do a trade of both surface and minerals. The University of Utah owns most of this parcel that is over close to the Colorado border that I've outlined in red. It's called the South Block of the LaSalles. It's a large acreage as you put it together. And the value, so the appraisals on this project have just begun, so we don't know the amounts or the exact acreage, but the LaSalle block is larger, we know, than the amount of land that the public schools will acquire. So it will be a piece of that LaSalle block, depending on how the appraisals come out. And so that's where the land exchange will happen. You might ask, why are we wanting to trade potentially revenue producing land for land that is not, that doesn't have mineral? Well, there are minerals, but they're not revenue generating. And so the answer to that question is, in this appropriation that the legislature made to purchase important large blocks of recreational land, they aren't going to need to use the entire $50 million. Excuse me. The entire $50 million, it'll be about $30 million. So that leaves $20 million available. If the schools trade into the South Block of the LaSalle's, there will be money left over from the first purchase to cash the schools out of the portion of the LaSalle's that we acquire. So the land exchange would happen first, and then they will purchase the property, and it will then be revenue going into the public schools. Cami, if you'll go to the next slide. I hope this is clear because I know it's a little bit complicated. In the 2024 legislative session, there was a bill that passed that authorized the Trust Lands Administration to sell these particular kinds of large land blocks that have to be at least 5,000 contiguous acres. They have to be connected. They can't be scattered. They need to have high public recreational interest and be low revenue generating to the trust. They could be sold to the Department of Natural Resources. Now, the legislation said that the Trust Lands Administration is not required to sell it. As beneficiaries, we made quite an issue that appraisals, there had to be done third-party appraisals to determine fair market value, and that the Trust Lands Administration needed to be able to set the rules so that they are in charge of the sale and not the Department of Natural Resources. So if you'll go to the next slide, Cami. So the property, I guess I need to do this as well. Let's see. So in the Book Cliffs area, and another confusing thing that happened in our back and forth is that there seems to be some misunderstanding. The Book Cliffs is a very large area of the state. And though the trust owns a significant portion, it doesn't own the entire Book Cliffs. I want to be clear about that. And the portion that the trust owns is larger than the amount that the Department of Natural Resources wants. So if you'll go to the next slide, Cami, it will show you a picture. So I think you have probably seen the footprint. It's what's outlined in blue at the bottom of the Book Cliffs. The part in green in the picture of Utah is showing where that Book Cliffs block is. It's located in Grand County towards the Colorado border. It's very important to hunters primarily and to the Department of Natural Resources. And it's called the roadless area. So the block is much larger. What they're interested in is what is called the roadless areas, and it's about 50,000 acres. So if you'll go to the next slide, Cami, please. Thank you. So you have received a lot of information, and I'm just going to try and tell you really briefly, and then if there are questions, I can try and answer questions. If there's lots, it might be best to take some of them offline given your time frame. The revenue that is currently being generated from that Book Cliffs block in a year on 50,000 acres is $125,000. The appraisals, the final appraisal that has come in is valued that same piece of property at almost $30 million. So the proposed sale to the Department of Natural Resources would be on a very low revenue producing parcel that we have had difficulty generating any revenue in the 25 years I've been involved with the trust. It would provide an opportunity to put that money into the fund where it can generate interest and ongoing distribution to the public schools. So, and then the other part of it is that after that $30 million goes, if the board decides to sell it, that won't happen until the June meeting. If they make the decision to sell it, there'll be $20 million remaining. The Department of Natural Resources, their second most important target is the south block of the LaSalle's, and that funding would be used to purchase that block if the appraisal comes in and if the arrangements for having that happen, that Trust Lands Administration is in favor, then it would cash out the schools from the parcel that will be traded into that entity. So if you have questions, I will do my best to answer them. If you want to send questions to me, I'm happy to respond to them offline. Just let me know how you would like to handle this next part.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any hands right at the moment, but if the current revenue is 125,000, is that annually?
Yes.
And then, but what is the projected revenue now that they've found these?
Okay, that's a really important question. So to be clear, the Hot Rock is not on the Book Cliffs property. The Hot Rock is on a separate piece of property in Beaver County.
That we're trading to the University of Utah.
Correct.
And then they get the revenue from now on from that? From the mineral?
So that's an important question as well. The only revenue that the Trust Lands Administration is making right now is coming from the Department of Natural Resources. They have a grazing permit and an access permit. So
that's 125,000.
Yeah, they just won't be paying that to the trust anymore. I think an important part of this is that the revenue generating potential on this piece of property, and the reason it was blocked up in the first place, is that there is oil and gas possibility to make a lot of money on the minerals. The minerals, like I explained before, you don't sell minerals. We will retain the minerals, and if this piece of property ever becomes in a situation where it can be economic, the trust would be able to mine those minerals. All that the Department of Natural Resources is purchasing is the surface.
Where did the $50 million come from? Because I heard it was the education stabilization account. That can't be right, can it?
That's correct. That's where it came from. It was appropriated 2 years ago. And it went from the Economic Stabilization Fund and went directly to the Department of Natural Resources for this purpose.
So they used education money to buy a piece of land that education already has to give to the Department of Natural Resources?
I think that's an accurate representation, yes.
So when I was talking to someone last night, I said it was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and she said, no, it's robbing Peter to pay Peter. It's taking education money. It's like saying, give me $5 to buy your bicycle. And so you give someone $5, they buy your own bicycle that you own. They give you back the $5, but they take your bicycle away. Is that what's happening here?
The legislature appropriated that money from education stabilization 2 years ago and put it into that fund. That's what happened. Now, I do want, if it's okay, Chair, I would like to explain that I don't think anyone is happy. Well, some people are happy, but I don't think anybody in education is happy that that happened. I think what we are all looking and trying to do is to see if we can put guardrails around the education stabilization fund so that this doesn't happen again. And I am aware that we have, and especially the advocacy office has been working with Representative Walter, who introduced a bill in the last legislative session that would do that and would eliminate I don't know if you want to call it leakage or what you want to call it, but that would prevent that kind of an appropriation from happening again.
Who has been getting the interest on the $50 million that was taken out of the Education Stabilization Fund 2 years ago? Education or the Department of Natural Resources?
It's in the Department of Natural Resources coffer, so I would assume that it's probably in the PTIF, but I don't know that. I'm just guessing.
Thank you. I'm looking for hands. Members, do you have any questions or comments? I'd like to make a motion that we ask staff to bring back options and information about the process for requesting guardrails to be put around the Education Stabilization Fund. And I don't know if we want to get, it may be wise to get the full board support on that. So to make that a committee recommendation to get the full board to understand the situation here. Committee members, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard for I had a conversation via email with Director Plant about the sale of this land and just, understanding, when we sell a piece of land, is that money being reinvested? Are we, is that money continuing to benefit our students? And I think that's an important discussion to have.
Yeah. So the question is, do you all feel that we should request staff to bring this information back to us with some suggested options at our next committee meeting? Or do you want to request that the board requests staff, and then that would be a double process, but they would be aware? Maybe this is enough to make them aware because this would go in the report out.
Hey, Cindy.
Yes, Chair Hemis.
I don't know if I don't know if we need to send it to the full board to direct staff. I'd be happy to just do it within here, but what are our options? I guess I'm a little confused and maybe I just missed something on what can we do about this anyway? It sounds like it's happening. What say do we have in it? Whether we direct staff to do more work and then we get to do nothing, or we get to do nothing now, what's the difference?
Yeah, I think that's why I don't sense an interest from committee members, and I'm guessing would be the same with the board, to take a position on this particular sale, though we have been criticized publicly by the initial founder of the trust lands, the whole trust lands, for not doing so. But I think the bigger issue is the fact that the stabilization money was used and given to the DNR and it's gathering interest there instead of to the school children of Utah. And that was used to buy our own lands. I think that's, and please don't take our own lands out of context. That means lands that were, set for school children and education in Utah. That's what I mean by that. But I think the only way we can move forward now is to work with Representative Walter, who sounds like he's already doing this, and help make suggestions as to how the stabilization fund is used for things such as this or not used for things such as this in the future.
Right. And for this one though, it's this, and we talked a little bit about this. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. This would be essentially we're talking today about not necessarily moving the needle forward with Representative Walter, because that's got to come at a different time, but taking a position.
This would be the pre-work to making a legislative policy request. Not on book cliffs, but on the stabilization fund,
right,
and how it's being used. And maybe we want to take a position on the way that the lands are sold. But in law right now, I mean, they did get the 3 bids, which is great. But to critics' point, there wasn't an auction. Maybe that land could have generated more funds if there would have been an auction, maybe less. I don't know. But the thing I'm asking for at this point, I don't even know where to go with that one. The thing I'm asking for with this is that we just do some pre-work to what a policy request could possibly look like, to work with Representative Walter on creating some guardrails around that stabilization fund account.
And I'm supportive of that. I agree. That would be helpful if we are going to make a legislative request. What that's going to look like, a little more detail, especially since that's what they ask from us is detail. And I don't want to be sitting there saying, I don't have any detail. We just want it fixed. Right. So I appreciate the direction.
Okay. I am not seeing other hands right now, so I'm going to go ahead and make that motion that the committee directs staff to bring back information and potential options regarding the process for establishing guardrails around the Education Stabilization Fund. Seeing no hands, members, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? That passes unanimously with Member Bogus absent. And let me say, I made a few questions and comments, just trying to understand and wrap my head around it like everybody is at this point. And as we continue to learn more and understand better, I'm sure some of those opinions may shift, but the final word I'll say on this is I see pros and cons to this whole situation. And there certainly are some pros, but there certainly are some cons to the way it seems like the way it all came about. So,
Board Member Davis.
yes.
May I just offer, I know there's been a lot of questions about not using the appraisal process. And like you said, there are pros and cons to that. Would it be helpful to the committee if I put together an explanation of why the Trust Lands Administration believes not going to an auction was the better option, so that you have some idea of why didn't they do that?
If you could just even send that via email, I think it would help us as we're having conversations with people who have that specific concern.
I would appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll do that. Thank you.
That would be really helpful. Thank you. Okay, members, we're 7 minutes past our stop time. We have 2 information items left. Financial audit findings and our legislative estimates minimum school program.
Was there any action we needed to take on 7 besides requests for more information from staff?
You can take an action. Oh, well, I guess we're finished with it now. I mean, we could have, but
Okay.
considering the strong pros and cons, it would be at this point, I think that's why I made the motion for the action to just let's figure out how to deal with this stabilization fund. And
So this is okay to wait till August
I
for the full board?
I
Or,
think so, unless committee members want to make some kind of a take a position on whether this land should or should not be sold. Here's the bottom line. We have no say. We can take a position, we can express an opinion, but we don't get to choose. So there are ramifications of a position either way.
Is I'm curious though, Chair Davis, if that's something that the board needs to work with the legislature on in terms of, I mean, we're charged with overseeing education in Utah. And this is a major funding source for that.
Yeah.
Yet we have zero say in it. And so that I find that a little bit concerning. So
Mm-hmm. We used to have more say, and that was taken away.
Well, and
So-
this might be to the motion we just passed. If the staff say, look, we want more say, let's put this in our legislative request. It could be part of that, but as of right now, we don't have it.
mm.
So that we may want to talk about that when this agenda item comes back up around. And quite frankly, this report out will be on our June agenda. And as a full board members may want to take a position one way or another. This sale, I don't think happens till June 18th. Is that right, Director Plant?
Yeah, that's when the board will consider. It doesn't mean they will take action that day.
Okay.
That's when they will consider taking action.
Okay. Got it. So as, members study more details of this, they may or may not, considering all the ramifications.
If the board took a stance, could that potentially influence the decision of of the committee that ultimately makes that decision?
Director Plant, what do you think?
Taking a position, I think they probably, the reason you hold public comments and the reason we had a public comment session was because they do want to hear what people say, right? And so, if you want to take a position, I think it's a little bit of a challenge, however, to understand the complexities of it and decide and be able to decide one way or the other. But of course, I think that you need to be informed, but historically, the board has tended not to want to weigh in on complicated projects like this because they are so complicated. It's kind of the reason that you have experts like, running the two trusts.
And I do think in some cases, the board may want to take an action, but to that point, Director Plant, that's why I was uncomfortable taking a position substantively on what my opinion is or isn't on book cliffs today, because I felt like it was premature. I've been having conversations and studying, and every single time I learn a bit more of a piece on this side or this side of the equation, and I felt like it was premature for me to take any kind of action substantively. It may not be in the full board, and it may be a little audacious because we do hire experts to do this, but maybe the board members want to do that. And if they have time to deep dive into the details between now and then, that may be something that they choose to do.
If you wanted to have someone come and answer the questions, whether in a board meeting or in an optional kind of ad hoc sort of meeting. I know you have problems with, it becomes public if there are more board members, but I think it's very complicated. And I think if you wanted to be able to ask the people who put it together the questions that you have, let me know what I can do to help you do that, because I want your questions to be answered. I know it's very complicated.
Okay. Sometimes our board leadership will set up something where no more than 7 can participate or something, so that they can try to wrap their heads around information. And so if they may choose to do that, and they can contact you if they do want to do that. Thank you so much for offering. That's a kind offer. Okay. Can we hear from someone just for a minute on these two, 1.8 and 1.9? We're 13 minutes over. Are these pretty substantial report outs, and can we do them when we meet on June 5th? Or are they timely things we need to know now?
Chair Davis, we're happy to quickly run through these, or we're happy to do those in June as well.
What does
There's
quickly
nothing
mean to
time
you?
sensitive, but
What does quickly, how do you define quickly?
we could do under 5 minutes for both.
Or combined?
Yep.
Let's do it.
I know we're the only thing between
Yep.
Memorial Day weekend and everybody, but John Palmer, I believe, is here for the LEA audit findings.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you, John.
Sure. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. So yeah, just real quickly here. So every year the LEAs go through an external audit, and then they'll produce financial statements. These were the findings from those audits from the external firms. This is just a summary of those, so we wanted to present those here today and see if you had any questions or anything we could answer. It's a kind of a typical year. What we found, mostly budgetary compliance findings. Um, but yeah, happy to answer any questions, or yeah, just let me know.
Members, do you have any questions? Would these be considered substantive findings, or like crossing T's, dotting I's, or?
Yeah, good question. It's a mix, mostly no, so mostly not serious. Yeah. Um, the if you scroll down to the third page there, it's kind of a summary of, so the first 2 columns we would consider clean audits. So these would be unmodified opinions and then an emphasis of matter, which just means it was a clean audit, but we want to draw your attention to something. So I would say only 6 of those were kind of the more serious, and we did issue letters, and we're kind of following up with the LEAs on those ones as well, just to make sure everything's kind of resolved for the next year. So
Are these numbers comparable to years past?
yes, yeah.
This is not terrible considering the number of LEAs we have and the amount of money that's going through this system. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. We're 1.9, legislative estimates minimum school program.
Yes, this item, Dale Frost and Winona Moss are here. We really didn't want to prepare a long presentation for these. We just wanted to make Finance Committee members aware that these are here. They've been sent to LEAs. We've done training with the LEAs regarding these estimates, and offered ad hoc training to all the LEAs as well. But basically, this is very important for their budgeting process, for them to receive these summaries. So you're looking here at Alpine School District's legislative estimate summary. Again, we do have estimates for, their basic levy revenues, their voted and board levy revenues, and those sorts of things. and we have estimates based on enrollment projections for all of the categorical programs and things as well. So the LEAs use these extensively in their own budgeting process, and we do extensive training. And I just want to commend the work of our minimum school program team of Dale Frost and Winona Moss in preparing these accurately. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of detail, and they do a fantastic job. So that's it. I think we did that in 5 minutes, Chair Davis. So
You did. You're amazing. Thank you. Any final comments from members? And thank you, Dale and Winona, also for your work on that. We know you do a ton. And seeing none, I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned. Have a great Memorial Day weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
you.